Thanks. The bit about the professor. Patty is the result of an unwise affair between her mother when she was a university student and an up and coming star physics professor. And they never ended up getting married. And her mother went back to their hometown. Um, and her father sends child support, and she sees him occasionally. And when she and Chelsea started going to conventions when they were like 14, her dad would book the room and would stay with them and work in the room part time as sort of chaperone while they did the con. And this year he's not even coming. She's going to go and see him for dinner on Sunday. So they have free reign of the con as teenagers who are just about to start grade 11 at this point. So that's the story behind the professor, and that does become quite significant in looking at Patty's personality and the running jokes about Wikipedia and the fact that her father has a Wikipedia entry, um, and this makes a lot more sense when you read the book.
And
Um,
also, the title of the chapter, the My God, It's Full of Starfruit, is actually the first line of the following chapter. So it's
yes.
immediately following what you just read, and it's also the source of the line that we used for the back cover.
Right. The sequel to Space Odyssey, not Space Odyssey itself, reveals the final transmission that was sent. Before that, the movie goes psychedelic and he becomes a star child and so forth. And the last line that Bowman was able to transmit to Earth before he left humanity was, "My God, it's full of stars." So this is "My God, it's full of starfruit," and it's you know what? When you're writing a novel that has an element of the comic in it, sometimes you're just being silly. And this is just silly, but it does directly lead to the next chapter, and this idea that yeah. So, are there any questions arising from that?
Well,
Because I know there
now
wanted
I'm
Gina.
curious which
Yeah.
came first. Did you like find a way to fit Starfruit in so you could use that line, or did it just kind of come about naturally and you went, "Oh, wait a minute, this is a perfect way to use this as a, literary prop."
It just came up. There's running gag references to
That
fruit. I mean, there's a whole thing
that's
about
true.
cantaloupe that keeps coming up in this book. And whether Jane Austen would have eaten cantaloupe, and it would have, but and cantaloupe, but not in the sense that we use cantaloupe, because what we call cantaloupe, much of the rest of the world does not call cantaloupe, um, and yada yada. So the idea of starfruit, and that is always something I've thought about with starfruit. It's like, what exactly is starfruit anything but an aesthetically interesting looking fruit? I'm sure it has nutrients, but nobody goes out and says, "Hey, this is yummy starfruit that I've ever experienced in my life." It ends up in salads because it's shaped like stars. And I just remember thinking that's just one of those absurdities. It's why do we have starfruit? Well, because it's shaped like stars. It literally is the boy band of fruit. Um, it looks pretty. Um, and so it really wasn't a plan. It's just it came up when I was talking about starfruit, and I thought, my God, it's full of starfruit. And I thought that's just people will either roll their eyes, and that's fine, or they'll actually think that's sort of funny in a silly way, or they'll just completely miss it because they don't know the reference and they'll move on because honestly the book's plot and the character development will not be significantly affected by your having seen the not especially good, in my opinion, sequel to Space Odyssey, which is, I think, a great movie. But the sequel did give us, my God, it's full of stars. Um, and that has got to be one of the most quoted nerd lines. I mean, it ranks up there with, I've got a bad feeling about this, and the entire script of The
Yes.
Princess Bride as things that nerds
Yes.
routinely
And
quote.
second star to the
Um,
right, straight on till morning.
Yes, there's so many of those that if you go to a con, someone's going to say one of them at some point. Um, and that's okay. That's I don't mind doing a little bit of that kind of humor because I'm trying to, even though this is its own story, I'm trying to create the ambiance of all the cons I've been to. And there's quite a bit of different cons and world cons, and we actually get a flashback to when some of the characters went to a world con back in the 90s, the adult characters. But there's also a lot of Michigan's Penguicon, which, by the way, Penguicon does do that with the coffee. You can have coffee, you can have decaffeinated coffee, and you can have what they call rocket fuel, which is coffee brewed with caffeinated water. And it has
I
quite a
can
kick.
imagine. I
Yes.
definitely liked the small con feel to the setting, the convention. It's reminds me a lot lot of Ad Astra, which is yeah,
I've
it's
been
a
to Ad
fairly
Astra,
small
yes.
con in the east side of Toronto. Excuse me. But they do manage to get some big name authors, and
Right.
yeah, it's just very kind of homey and welcoming, and it's mainly just a place for science fiction and fantasy fans to hang out.
Right, exactly. And certainly I've been to Ad Astra many times. In fact, my first con ever back in the 80s, and then I didn't go to another con for a long time for various reasons. It was an Ad Astra, I'm pretty sure. I was there with Darby, who I think, if he hasn't fallen asleep, is in the audience, and Jeff Beeler, who may be in the audience and has run things at conventions many times. Um, and there, of course, my connections to Sarnia. It was just happenstance that Kurt in Trollbridge lived in Sarnia. So that moved when I wrote the con several of the characters to Sarnia. Now I've had friends there. I've been to Sarnia many times, and I lived there during a teaching practicum back in 1990 in an apartment which I the description of the Slessex first apartment when they were newly married was actually my friend Darby's apartment. Um, I just gave it to them because it was had a certain character to it. So Sarnia then suddenly became important to all these stories. But I don't live in Sarnia. I just have friends in Sarnia, or in some cases who no longer live there, and that's okay.
So we
Um,
have a question from the chat asking, so for the big
great.
budget action film version, who do you picture as the main characters?
And I'm wondering if that's my niece because we actually had this discussion. But big budget makes it sound like it might be my nephew Sean, who actually works in the film and TV industry in LA as a composer. Hi, if you're out there, everyone. Hi to my family, if you're out there. Any of you who are still hanging on and listening. Um, uh, the funny thing is, I'm a great. I mean, if anybody ever wanted to buy the rights to this, I would be thrilled, and would probably listen to a lot of what they have to say. But if I were choosing, and I think it would probably work better as folded into a TV series, actually, HBO or Amazon Prime. No, if I'm a great believer in having actors who actually look something like the characters for the most part. I would absolutely, I would almost fight for it. The teenagers have to be played by teenagers, especially because they interact with adults. The American movie thing of having 25-year-olds play teenagers looks stupid, especially to teenagers. And in this, there's a lot of crossover between the teen and adult plots. And having a 25-year-old interact with, somebody who's 30 as though they have that difference in age. I also think it would be really cool if this ever got adapted, if you actually had a performer with cerebral palsy to play Patty, who wasn't simply imitating a condition, but understood what living with that meant. But it was funny when my niece and her boyfriend asked me about this sort of thing. I thought, yeah, normally I'd want people who look like the characters. But one exception came to mind. I thought, who would play Telfrin? And I know this was strange. And I thought, well, Telford would have to be a damn good actor. And who came to mind immediately was Peter Dinklage. And Telfrin is not a person of that stature in the novel. Um, but I mean, let's face it, Dinklage gets called the great dwarf actor. No, he's one of the greatest actors of our time, period, of any size. And you'd want a really talented actor, which he is. But I also realized that would be a change that would actually work. In fact, the finale, not the finale, but the climax of the book, there would be some advantages, and I don't want to give too much away, if you had an actor who was, smaller than average size. So if anyone here knows Peter Dinklage, no. But that aside, I think I would really hope for actors who looked more or less like the people that are described in the book, who are the right age, background, and so forth. And because I think that there is a tendency, especially to misrepresent nerds. If you've ever seen the original pilot, the unaired pilot, which keeps getting dropped online, and then they get sued, they get told to we'll pull it back. But the first pilot of Big Bang Theory, which was changed significantly, they had a different character playing what's her name, the blonde waitress. I only watched the first season and a half. They had a different character, and she was more of a tough woman. But Leonard and Sheldon did not speak in high-pitched, squeaky voices, and they really felt like real nerdy science students. And when they redid the pilot, the network said, yeah, you have to make some changes. They were instructed to talk in sort of goofy voices, and they were pushed more in a direction of caricature. Now, it's a sitcom, so sitcom is caricature. I get that. Sitcom is always, but I thought I would not want, I don't think I've done it that way. When there is caricature or when there's stereotype, it's coming from within. It's coming from, yeah, we can spot bits of those stereotypes in ourselves and in other people we see at cons. And so I would want it to feel real. And when there's a satiric or parodic view, it's not because they're nerds. It's because they're flippin' human beings. And as soon as you take a look at any human being from the right perspective, the things we do start to look pretty ridiculous. And a lot of science fiction a lot of speculative fiction has played with doing that, from very complicated views to things like The Left Hand of Darkness, which looks at which has people for whom physical sex keeps changing, and this is very hard for human beings to deal with, or even lighter things like watch old episodes of Star Trek. There's any number of episodes which are pretty blatant social commentary, right? The episode with the aliens who are half dark and half light, and it's very cheesy in mid 60s, but as social commentary you can't miss it. It's where the lawman from the planet is after the fugitive, who's kind of a rights activist, and the humans of the future can't understand why the lawman considers this other guy from his own race inferior. He's a member of an inferior race, and they look the same. And finally he says something like, are you blind? I'm, black on this half and white on this half, and he's black on this half and white on this half. And they just look at him like he's an idiot. And all the 12-year-olds in the audience say, that's stupid. Oh, wait. Yes, that's unbelievably stupid. And it's exactly what human beings do. So this is science fiction has always done that. It's always, and satire has often leaned towards fantasy, right? Jonathan Swift, Gulliver's Travels is a satiric book. Looking and few people a few writers have matched Swift for the understanding of just how absurd the human race is, um, which is fascinating because he was an Anglican priest. Um, and boy, did he understand our dark side and mocked it mercilessly. And in some ways, he's a proto science fiction writer. As some, Gulliver's Travels is about someone who goes off to adventures in other worlds. They're islands. He goes off on a ship, but it's kind of, sort of proto science
Mm-hmm.
fiction, certainly fantasy. So I'm doing a little bit of that, but it's mostly gentler satire. It's aimed at the whole of
Mm.
humanity. You know, Kate frequently looks as ridiculous as the nerds, including her making a remark about how obsessed the game people in the gaming room are with games. She's a star athlete. You know, um, her whole life are games. Uh, that's just us, right?
Yep. So the chat uh, mentioned Penny was the character's name on The Big Bang Theory.
Thank you. I couldn't remember Penny's name.
I've
Yes.
honestly never watched more than just occasional walking in the room while my mom had it on. You know,
The first two seasons are not bad, and I know it was hugely popular, and I will never have anything that successful, so who am I to talk? But I really felt that it became continuously more parodic in a way that it felt condescending, it felt looking
yeah,
down in a way the early episodes weren't so much. Whereas you can read a much nastier piece of satire of nerds, the Eltingville Club, graphic novel, and that's from within. So the person is mocking aspects of nerddom that rightly infuriate him because he's one. He's one of us. And he's saying, and these are the people who keep screwing up fandom by being, entitled, misogynistic, um, gatekeeping. Any word I say after that would be probably not broadcast friendly. So read the Eltingville Club because it really is hysterical and brilliant, but it's written from within. It's written by someone who knows exactly the people he's writing about and recognizes that maybe he has a little bit of them.
yeah. Personally, I always felt that, from what admittedly little I've seen of The Big Bang Theory, it felt more like taking the ridiculous side characters from other sitcoms and making them the stars instead of making them into actual characters.
Yeah, and again, it depends, I think, on what season. And my wife has a more positive view of the show. And then again, it's a sitcom, and anybody who goes to sitcoms, any sitcom for reality is delusional. It's meant to be laugh a minute entertainment. And as I said, I certainly don't anticipate ever having the kind of success that show had.
Well,
So
you never know.
who am I to? Oh, sure, I would take it,
And again,
but
you
we
have
all would.
your
We all would, but most of us are never going to have that opportunity, and that's fine.
again you have your upcoming feature on John Scalzi's blog, whatever.
Yes,
So that will be exciting to see next week.
it was funny to see Scalzi's Twitter the other night because he did a tweet. For those of you who are not science fiction readers or whatnot, John Scalzi is an incredibly successful and brilliant science fiction writer. Um, and anyway, so he occasionally tweets things, and he tweeted books that are mostly from people who are a pile of books that are mostly from people who are going to be guesting that's in the next month or so on his blog. And so the con was in it, and of course there's a whole bunch of people in that pile who are actually famous. So when I read down the comments, there was one person who actually immediately identified my book, and no, I'm not on Twitter. This wasn't me using an alias, who identified that as one of the two they absolutely wanted to read, and I think they looked up what it was. But there was one person who just posted, The Con, really? And I don't think they knew what it was. I think they just thought the title was kind of, not science fiction. I don't know what they thought, but I went back to her Twitter, and she calls herself a mean girl, so maybe I don't want a mean girl fan anyway. But two other people who mentioned it were like, "Gee, I can't read something called The Con after 4 years of Donald Trump." So, so I became a punchline. But those are the people commenting, and hats off to Scalzi for his willingness. If you know Scalzi, he's willing to promote all kinds of people. Um, and he's willing to put his weight as somebody who is really quite achieved things in the field of science fiction, um, into politics and into standing against some of the nastier sides to conventions, because that is certainly there, and I don't focus. That's up front and center in the con, although you get traces of it. Um, any large gathering is going to have some things that maybe aren't so good, and any convention, particularly with lots of alcohol, is sometimes going to bring out, and lots of caffeine, the worst side of people, and sometimes even very good people will cross lines, and I kudos to Scalzi for trying to say, there are certain things that people should not be doing, and things of that nature, and for his willingness to promote, all kinds of people. Um, you got to love John Scalzi. At Worldcon, God, in Montreal, I think it was. So we were on an elevator together, and he had his Hugo Award that he'd won the night before. Said, "Hey, you want to hold a Hugo Award?" So I got to hold his Hugo Award. And then this is like the worst guy joke ever. But the next time I saw him at another con, he was at the next urinal, in the washroom. And of course, Hugo Awards look like rockets. So we made the joke that, "Gee, the last time we were together, I was the one holding your Hugo." So, uh, just bad guy washroom humor. But yeah. So other questions, because, well, I suspect there's a whole bunch of people rolling their eyes and face palming right now, and you should be.
Yeah, so if you have any more questions, chat, please feel free to chime in. We've been streaming for about an hour and 45 minutes now, so if there's anything else you'd like to touch on, JD, please go right ahead. Otherwise, I think this might be a good time to start wrapping up, but go ahead.
Yeah. You'd wanted to wrap up with, or near the end, do a really
Oh, a
short
Janeite reading. Yes.
Janeite reading, Lady Susan, where she's still being Lady Susan, and we're not seeing what's underneath Lady Susan. And I was gonna, just for fun, I can't find it now, begin to read the chapter where she's pondering the concept of polyamory, which she's never encountered before, and certainly Jane Austen was not writing about. But instead, we're going to go to chapter 8, which is her first chapter. And I will try to do this justice, just as I tried to do the pastiche justice. And I know, fair warning, I am not Jane Austen, nor could ever claim to be. So Lady Susan Vernon, because she's not using her real name yet. The journey from Lakefield to the metropolis was not beyond a few hours, and I set out without either dreading its length or feeling its solitariness. We arrived in Mississauga and watched for the first appearance of the Constellation Inn with little perturbation, but when at length we turned in at the roundabout, my spirits were in high flutter. The Constellation Inn is a large, brick-veneered building, standing well on paved ground and backed by an expanse of scrubland and parking lots. I soon settled into comfortable lodgings and changed into the costume and character more suited to the evening. I made a most grandiose entrance into our crowd. The chatter, hitherto most respectfully dedicated to her most esteemed wordsmith by her dutiful and obedient humble readers, immediately turned their attention to my person. I received not a few compliments on the work, and to some I could return the compliment. A woman embroidered in her tambour frame. Two of the gentlemen present wore fine soldiers' uniforms with polished brass buttons. I should have lighted upon either such man, for I like a red coat very well, but while I certainly greeted them both with convivial affection, my past experience has informed me that they share lodgings year round, and would share with the fairer sex only the most capricious and inconsequential of flirtations. Denise Moon bestowed greetings upon me. She is perhaps 30, round of face, but with what I recollected as an amiable disposition. We first encountered each other 1 year ago, where we shared wine enough to raise our spirits and invite some confidence. I knew that she harbored some melancholy about her life. Her parents wished her married and with family, as her older sister was. Her older sister wished she would visit their parents more often, and she wished she possessed an apple-shaped bottom instead of the pear-shaped body that she acknowledged her own. She had notwithstanding a little beauty, and when plied with wine and press could name some accomplishment. She possessed a charitable kindness that led her to assist with good works, mostly through a church she attended, and she assessed herself a fair cook, whether the occasion called for turkey casserole or mayokuk. She was also an accomplished cellist. I turned our private conversation as quickly as decorum would merit to our situation in the hotel. The members of our party would be abed soon enough, it being their disposition to rest or read, and I hoped she would look favourably upon more wine consumed not in our private quarters as before, but that the large hotel and its bars should be the fairest field of action. I think you should find many occasions for flirtation and a little dissipation. Your dress, she remarks, does show a remarkable amount of cleavage for the period. I guess that suits your character. Oh, you're playing your character. Very good. It may be that I've chosen the character for a reason. Neither of us has grown any younger since our last encounter. My mother insists on how I'm too old to be unmarried, but I'm not desperate and I'm not looking for any kind of casual... Oh, I don't mean to judge. Indeed, I think it is very unfair to judge of anybody's conduct without an intimate knowledge of their situation. After proffering some excuse, I turned from my stammering companion. The table featured tea and shortbread and apricot cakes and sliced cantaloupe, which raised eyebrows and discussion among our fair assembly. It is a wonder, of course, that anything that we should do should elicit surprise. Assembled here with us in the inn are the queerest folk as have ever decorated a map of an unknown land imprinted in the distant past. At first glance of the lobby, one observes only a crowd, though their manner of dress at times is strange. Many of the men sport garish shirts, and I spied at least 3 Scottish kilts and 2 American fedoras. As one takes a clear vantage, one realizes that, flitting among the crowd, are found people with unexpected appendages, here and there asses' ears or cats' tails, and 1 or 2 creatures that barely seem human at all. I cannot help but wonder if suitable company might be found among these travelers from foreign stations. Indeed, a burly gentleman with whom I spoke earlier, though somewhat rough in his appearance, possessed a certain polish and charm. If adventures will not befall a lady in her own village, she must seek them abroad. As the discussion over the syllabus for the morrow has been replaced with one concerning the presence of sliced cantaloupe, I resolved to look further afield for admirers of my Regency wear. And that's kind of how she gets introduced beyond Telfrin's, thank you, view of her. But we do hear more about cantaloupe later, in one of those inane conversations that they're so, I think, so much part of why I go to conventions. It's like, wow, this is one of the places on earth where people would be talking about this and researching it. Yeah, because we're nerds, and this is cool. Um, and we will get more of her adventures as she ends up in the con suite with the science fiction fans and decides to spend some time with the science fiction fans, even though she's never really read any science fiction. But she's had an earlier encounter with Telfrin, and she actually finds Telfrin kind of interesting. And when the other Janeites go to bed, she's looking for a little action, and that's just the nature. This is her escape. This is how she gets away from being the person she's become in her adult life. And yes, you will find such people at conventions of all sorts. I heard a ding.
Sorry, that's. I apologize for. I'm getting some texts here unrelated. So I'll just mute my. Oh, and I've got cats going crazy behind me, so I apologize for any crashing there. So.
No problem. Any other questions?
Well, looks like the chat has been satisfied. So thank you, everybody, for joining us. This has been great. Thank you for everything that you've told us and revealed to us about the con. Thank you, chat, for coming. And yeah, be sure to check out the book. Again, where's my finger? brain-lag.com. And you can order it directly from BrainLag. Also, it is, again, available through major bookstores throughout the world.
And it's probably not nearly as obnoxious as the author has been tonight. Um, so I hope you enjoy it and you take what you take out of it. I always interested in hearing what people make of my stories, whether it's negative or positive or
Yeah,
in
so
between.
please feel free to email us and share your thoughts. And thank you to the chat who just said buy extra copies for Xmas.
Thank you, and also check out Brainlag's other
Yes.
books because we have got you guys have been on for
Yes.
10 years now, and you have got I mean there's a range of things, and not every book is going to be everybody's thing. You've got like mid-range, an author who's writing for
Yep.
tweens. But you've got some very cutting-edge science fiction, and without going into details, a couple of years ago, Ontario kind of lost its what had been touted as its cutting-edge science fiction publisher, and the less said about
Yes.
that, the better, because that turned very ugly. You're looking for a range of stuff, including some real cutting-edge stuff, and I don't mean me, although I do hope you read me. There's some excellent writers um, whose work is being disseminated, and you got to look to the small publishers to find the people who are going to produce the really impressive stuff down the road. Um, and as any final
And
questions,
just to add
comments?
to that, I will mention that in just over 1 week, we are going to have a huge backlist sale on BrainLag. So, any of our titles, there were, I think, 12 different titles from mid 2019 and earlier. They're all going to be on sale through brainlag.com for $10 each. So if you're looking to buy some extra books for some holiday presents or birthday presents for those of us with late year birthdays, then sorry, the cat's trying to get into your books. So yeah, be sure to check out brain-lag.com. We're going to have that backlist sale, and all of the books sold directly through BrainLag are below list price. So something else to keep in mind. Anyway, thanks again for coming, everybody, and I hope you have a great rest of your evening.
Everyone else have a great evening, and I'd like to also do a shout out to my family, friends who came, all of my beta readers. I just got a text from Tanya Jordan who checked my math. Thank you for requesting chapter 5. Um, and I would call your attention to a now mostly forgotten writer named Thomas B. Costain. Anyone here? I don't know if you've heard of him, but when he was just a year older than me, back in the 1940s, he published his first novel. And he then went on to have multiple bestsellers, many of which were adapted into Hollywood
Excellent.
movies. So just because I'm an older writer doesn't mean I don't have stories to tell. And go to Brainlag because there is such a bewildering range of writers in the science fiction and fantasy range um, who are well worth reading. And you'll find, maybe this writer isn't your cup of tea, but that this writer will be. So well worth looking, well worth buying into that
Thank you,
sale
JD.
and some of your forthcoming titles. Okay.
All right.
Thank you very
Thank
much,
you.
everyone, for coming in. Hope you enjoy the book. I just want people to enjoy it.
Bye.